This bee balm is literally crawling with bees. Wow.
I just thought, a pink onion, why not try it?
Our hostas do well in Minnesota. They like our temperatures.
We have things blooming from early spring to late fall.
It's fun to imagine what this place will be like in a few years. We've just gotten started.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on Great Gardening. I'm your host, Sharon Young, and tonight we're talking colorful gardens. We'll take you on a tour of a vibrant Duluth garden. Plus, our garden experts will tell us the importance of color in flowers and how can they help support the growth of your garden beyond just looking great. So let's introduce our experts now. They are horticulturist and educator Bob Olin and garden professional Deb Burns-Erickson of Burns Greenhouse in Zim. We want to hear from gardeners across our region who have questions for us. We have phone volunteers from the St. Louis County Master Gardeners to receive your questions this evening. Call locally at 218-788-2847 or just email us at ask@pbsnorth.org. We have a few questions we missed last week, so let's get to some of them now. All right, Bob, Deb. Ruth in Duluth has over 25 peonies. Do peonies need fertilizer, and if so, when?
Well, you could fertilize them. They put on the rootstock in the fall, so then you could give them a slow release for the fall. And the spring, you could give them a little boost. You could, compost. They really don't need much more.
They're very adaptable. They don't require a lot of nitrogen. Everything, when it's breaking bud in the spring of the year, could use a little nitrogen because it's nitrogen is here and there. It's ephemeral, so everything needs a little bit of additional nitrogen right when the buds are breaking in the spring. Other than that, they don't require a lot of fertility.
Good question, Ruth. A viewer in Superior is asking if they have to plant more than one apple tree for proper germination.
Now that's a good question,
right?
Because where is she from again?
Superior,
Superior.
Wisconsin.
Well, if she's right in town, there are enough apples in town so that a lot of that pollen is moving around. So in many cases, if you're in town, you got a small lot, only have room for one tree, I'd plant the one tree and it will be, the pollen will transfer from your neighbor's tree. If you got a little more room, it's always a good idea to plant two varieties that bloom approximately about the same time or get a crabapple mixed in there so we have plenty of pollen. But in town, for the most part, we still get good yields with one tree.
Yeah, and the question was about proper germination. So you were talking about germination and fertilization.
Well,
pollination.
Yeah, germination is really a seed that's beginning to break, of course. That's germination, and pollen transfer is pollination, and then when that pollen fertilizes the apple, it's fertilization. So a lot of different terminology here tonight.
I love it. Robert in Cloquet is asking, can you put wood ash on a vegetable garden and how much?
Ooh, that's such a good question.
Right, but you should start with a soil sample and then see what the experts tell you to do, and then they could advise you, but...
Yeah, take the soil test, and if your soil test requires lime, you can substitute wood ash. I actually did a little work on this, and actually it has more of a liming effect than limestone itself. So you have to be very careful. Don't make the mistake of putting it on any garden unless you've got a soil test that calls for lime.
Okay. John in Duluth emailed, why don't I see bagged manure for sale anymore?
Oh, well, what?
We do have it out there with certain types of products, and these would be generally, and I could use a few name brands. Sustain is one of them. That's poultry that's been turkey manure that's been composted completely. But we just don't have a lot of animals in the area or people in the business that would be bagging up cow manure or horse manure. So there are some products available, but it's principally composted poultry manure.
And then sometimes there was some trouble, a little bit of cross-contamination. I think they got away from a little bit of the bagging because there was some, with disease coming in if it wasn't completely broken down. And
yeah, that's exactly right. And anytime you're using any kind of a manure, you'd want to make sure that it's fully composted. That's going to take at least a year.
Yeah. And if they're rushing it, then that could be bad,
All right,
especially in a vegetable garden.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for answering those. We'll return for your questions, but right now let's go on a garden tour. In 2023, we visited the gardens of Brenda Maida. Her front and backyard space is filled with a variety of colorful plants. Let's learn about the work it takes to create something beautiful.
My name is Brenda Maida. This is my husband, Tom, and we live in Proctor, Minnesota. Welcome to our garden. We built this house about 7.5 years ago now, and so everything that's here on this property is done by us. It was all just a bunch of dirt, and we added sod and gardens, and this is where we are today.
Another challenge is a lot of the rocks, because everywhere you put a shovel, there's a rock, and as you look around the garden, you'll see a lot of rock edging. Almost every one of those came just from digging those gardens up.
Back here it's more woodland. I use different plants in the back than I did in the front. We tied in the ferns, but then we added pops of color throughout. Foxglove are one of my favorite flowers, and so we have a lot of those, and they kind of dance in the garden. We have several different things throughout the garden to add structure and to add an element of a surprise as you walk through the garden. It's an older fountain from an estate sale. It didn't have a pump or anything, so Tom added the pump and the water feature, and it's really important for us to feel that aspect of nature when you're hearing the sound of water run. And I like it back here a little bit more just because it's a secret garden. Nobody knows it's here. We can sit back here with the fountains on, and it's very peaceful. When I created and thought about the pathways, there was one reason it started. There's a big rock by a tree. When we built our house, they said, "Where do you want it?" And I did not want it in the front. So they moved it to the very back, and honestly, it's perfect because it's right near our fire pit. As we have a fire, if it gets a little warm there, then we can move over by the rock, and then you see people just sitting on it. And then when I created that garden, the lines of the garden along here to add additional flow and movement within the walkways of where you would go through. Everybody knows I have gardens up front, but nobody knows what the backyard looks like. So it's really nice to be able to bring somebody back here and just see the difference in style and then be able to meander through it, just to enjoy the different flowers and surprise people with what is here and what we've done so far.
You just watched part of one tour of Brenda Maida's space, but that was just her backyard. Her front yard features more colorful delights, which we'll show off later tonight. But for now, let's head over to Bob to discuss the importance of color in gardens.
Thank you. You know, it's fascinating because we assume that those beautiful colors in the flowers are there to make our lives happier, right? Mm-hmm. When in fact they have other functions, and a lot of them are to really, in the case of flowering material, they're really to attract the pollinating insects. And insects, and butterflies being one of them, of course, that are the most visible, they really are attracted to specific colors. They actually have eyesight that can actually see frequencies that we can as humans, but the color is beautiful here. Everything from reds and the contrasts, and here's an allium that's just so colorful, kind of a soft color, and I know Debs is going to discuss a little bit about how you can create emotion in your color selection. But these are real nice, and here again, a pollinating insect I mentioned. It seems like the honeybees and bees get all the credit, but a lot of the work's really done by very minuscule native bees. Forsythia, we're going to see those very soon in our landscape. They're beautiful. Then, of course, you've got the shrub for the rest of the year that you're going to deal with. You want to shape those up a little bit, but beautiful sign of spring coming very soon. And then when we take a look at fruits and vegetables, the significant thing here is all these pigments are really antioxidants. They're there for a reason. And so many of our original vegetables, here are the deep colors, those deep purple pigments, the antioxidants there protect the cell structure of the plants. This allowed them to survive, and that was their function. So they're beautiful to our eyesight, but they are very functional as well. We're seeing just a proliferation of color in vegetables now that we never saw before. Here's cheddar, a very beautiful yellow cauliflower, and graffiti, a purple cauliflower. A couple of these have been just bred recently, and they've kind of swept the vegetable world by storm. Very nutritious. Summer squash, along with some of our peppers, The colors are vibrant, that they add so much to the appearance of your vegetable dishes, but they also have a function. Those deep red pigments, again, those are the antioxidants that protect the seeds. In the case of pepper, protect those seeds, which allows the pepper to transmit life from one generation to the next. We've got some nice new colorful introductions. Here's one called Purple Magic, which is the first purple broccoli. And this was an all-American selection. It was nationwide, so we're looking forward to trying that. We'll have some in trial this year just to see how it does. But nice color again, so you get the antioxidant, anthocyanin in this case, along with the other healthful benefits of broccoli in general. And the Big Easy, nice name there. And we'll let Deb talk about that nice geranium and the multi-colorful pink response there. But that was another all-American winner. So we're always looking for color in both the flower material as well as fruits and vegetables. Again, peppers, we're trying to ripen peppers. Green peppers are just immature peppers, so we're trying to get them ripe. There's been a lot of interest there. They will all turn a nice color for you. Here's another one called Red Impact. This is a new pepper for us because it's a Goya, which comes out of Spain, but it's a short season Goya. We've got some of that seed. We're going to see if we can grow those and mature them in northern Minnesota as well. So we've got some new introductions, all very colorful, and we'll be taking a look at them and reporting back later. Now, designing, that's really your area.
Well, and more on the ornamentals. So thinking of the color wheel and how people put either a garden together or a container together, think about the color wheel. So if your colors are opposite, then there's more drama, it's much more dramatic. And then you just, like a black and a white, or like we have some of the plants here, and the minute you add white to things, it kind of makes all the colors more vibrant, but the opposites are really dramatic all on their own. But you can also go colors that are adjacent to each other, then they have a more calming, more relaxful effect, especially the cooler colors. They are really nice and calming. If you have more of the warm colors, then you're going to have a little bit more excitement, a little more fun, and they'll pop out of your landscape more. And the thing with landscaping, when people are planning a landscape, if you have a large yard, it's nice to have either a consistent color or a consistent specimen that runs through your yard, because your eye will naturally travel through an environment that is calming to it. If it's a bunch of different mixed up pots that you just, oh, I like this, I'm gonna put this here, this there, it's not as relaxing for your eye. So if you have a nice either specimen that you like and you travel through your garden, or a color that you can travel through your pots and travel through your garden, it's nicer on your eye, and you might have a more cohesive either container or garden.
Good points. And Deb, you know, one of the key factors in designing a pollinator garden for pollinating insects is blocks of color.
Yes.
That they can identify and focus in on instead of one or two specimens. Get a good block of orange or a good block of yellow.
At least 3 to 4 feet across, and so then they know to send scouts, they know to come back and forth, and they know there'll be a nectar and a pollen supply.
And it's also, I think, more appealing once you've designed it, they grow out fully to your eye as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Thanks for all of that. I did not know that about green peppers. All the things you're teaching all of us.
They're just immature. We got to let them grow up and mature.
Well, let's get back to some of your questions. We have a few questions from Hayward. Jerry in Hayward has 3 hydrangeas that are 2 to 4 years old but no longer bloom. They look healthy and have lots of leaves but no blooms. 2 are in full sun, 1 is in partial sun. What can she do to get blooms? The varieties are Summer Crush, Twist and Shout, and Bloomstead.
All sports of Endless Summer.
Okay.
So, and Endless Summer was the first one that, you know, it could go towards blue. It would bloom, but the buds are not cold hardy, and
they typically we have a lot of trouble bringing them into bloom. You know, Endless Summer kind of started the hydrangea craze. Really, they've been with us for a long time, but the real colorful varieties. And you're right, a lot of these are derivatives. What I've observed, and this is anecdotal, observational, is that you have to treat them a little tougher. You have to expose them to a little bit more stress. If you're fertilizing, you're getting all the vegetative growth at the expense of no bloom being set up. So I've transplanted Endless Summer into a poor location, poor soils, and suddenly they broke into bloom for me. So they might consider backing off on water a little bit, backing off on fertility by all means, and possibly even moving it to a less desirable location to see if you can't trigger the blooming effect again.
Right, because sometimes some plants need to feel like they're dying in order to bloom. It's a stress.
True.
They like, oh, I better reproduce, I better send out some seed. And if you're giving them everything, they don't need to do it.
If everything's perfect, like endless summer, then you're not going to bloom.
Right.
Yeah, those are good questions. Braden Hayward is asking about hydrangeas as well. Does he need to trim them every year, and how should they be trimmed?
That depends on the hydrangea.
Variety.
Yeah, you've got those that will overwinter, and actually the flower beds are set up in the fall, and then you've got those that are going to start this year and kick out lots of vegetative growth. So you really want to know your plant. It gets just a little bit confusing though. So I will tell people, take a look as you're coming through the winter, and anything that's brown and dry, cut it back to that point. If you've got buds that came through the winter, you want to let them go. Yeah. If they're really dry all the way to the base, then prune at ground level, and they will regrow from the roots and give you plenty of bloom a little later in the season. So take a good look, or when you're buying it, ask the vendor exactly what the growth habit is.
Okay, and we have a few questions about apple trees again. Teresa in Akeley is asking if she can use crabapple as a pollinator for regular apple trees.
That's good. You definitely can. They kick out all kinds of pollen. One of my favorite crab apples for this purpose is really the Dolgo, which is a beautiful tree. You'll see it listed as an ornamental, but you can make jellies, makes a great jelly. You can make juice out of it, and it adds color to your applesauce as well. Kicks out all kinds of pollen. Even a couple of ornamentals, they come early. Sometimes
right. You got to know
earlier.
your variety of apple to know its bloom time, because there's early, mid, and late on apple trees. So they just need to cross-pollinate. They need to overlap at least a week.
At least a week or
and
so.
And then, but if they're both in the same early or mid or late, then they have 2 weeks to pollinate.
Right.
So you kind of got to pay attention.
Okay, along the same lines about apple trees, a viewer in Saginaw wants to know when to start pruning.
Well, I think it's a little late right
now. Don't do it now.
Yeah, we're going into, we'd like to dormant prune, because dormant prune, once you take the pruning cut, if you do this in the winter or very, very early spring before they break bud, it rearranges the hormones and you kick new growth out. If you prune now when they're actively growing or beginning to grow, then that tends to restrict some of the growth and slows down the healing and the stimulating process. So maybe unless there's a real good reason, like there was some damage or limbs that are crossing, they could still prune those out, but you might want to wait until November when they're dormant again.
I know, it's just time to enjoy the trees,
Enjoy
right?
them, yes.
Right, thank you. So now let's head back to the gardens of Brenda Maida for more of her beautiful garden.
So this is the garden that started it all. And I had no idea what I was doing. It's more about what I like than it is for any rules, and that's kind of how it started. And so my gardening style up here is very just overstuffed and a lot of color. So I have revamped it several times. I move things, I share things. We have a dark gray house. I just wanted pops of color, and with that, we did flowers. Tom didn't like the electrical box there, and neither did I. And so we're trying to remove it from the eye while still making sure that we comply with the legal rules of that box being there. So it's kind of an eyesore to see, so we just planted a huge garden around it. And I have a wheelbarrow that I can remove, so that's fully planted with flowers every year to hide the view from the green box. I really like the roses behind me. There's wild roses down there. The reason I planted the roses there is because there was wild roses already blooming, and I wanted to complement that. And so we layered in more rose bushes and then some geranium. I continue to add and layer in new gardens every year. Some people may just want something small, but I think starting somewhere, find your joy in gardening like I have, and it's really a wonderful thing. You get to talking to your neighbors more too when you have flowers. That's for sure.
Let's wrap up things with more of your questions. I love the emails coming in. Dan is asking, what kind of grass seed would you recommend for a new mound septic system? And should I cover the new seed with mulch?
Well, that's good. I mean, Kentucky bluegrass, right, if it's in full sun.
Full sun.
But when you read your bag of seed, really read the back of the bag, because you should have about 70% of Kentucky bluegrass. A lot of them put filler in, a lot of annual grass seed, and as long as it's full sun, then that Kentucky blue would be really great. And then I would, like straw or mulch, and it would have been better to put it in the fall, but you can put it in now as long as you get a pretty good mulch on it to hold the moisture. You water it really well right away, and then it should come through.
So what's the downside of the annual grass? Is it just, it comes up
It's a
and then
filler.
that's-
It'll fill in, and it'll take the light and the energy and the water and everything away from the perennial grass, and so you'll be much more sparse in the next season.
Yeah,
And it's
it'll-
just for instant gratification, and
Yes.
It will die. Now
it will die.
That's the downside of it. It'll die next winter, guaranteed.
right.
Annual bluegrass.
Annual.
The other thing that you want to talk about is your common Kentucky bluegrass. That'll get, stay away from the elites. Common Kentucky bluegrass, 21 days to germinate. So you're going to have to, now the annual rye will jump in 5 days. So you think you got a lawn there, but you want to make sure you keep it moist, and you can do that with a chopped straw, not these thick layers of straw. But you asked about mulch. You want something that's chopped, or you could use peat, or you could use anything
Seed
that's a little
blankets,
finer,
too.
cellulose coverings, and then you have to keep those moist for 21 days to get that common Kentucky bluegrass to germinate.
Right.
Patience.
Patience.
Sandy from Finland, Minnesota is asking, can you recommend a hardy perennial ornamental grass for the northern garden other than Carl Forrester?
I can't. I have not found one. I don't know if you have, Bob. I mean, there's a blue fescue that's kind of cute and small, but I've not known of one that comes back and that can handle all of our extreme, especially that it wants it drier. So
It's going to be real interesting. We had a very mild winter, but that's something that's going to be difficult for a lot of these plants because they break dormancy and then they have to deal with the adverse conditions. So there really aren't a lot of good ornamentals that are dependable over 3, 4, 5, 6
right,
years.
and don't get lulled into that pampas grass,
Yeah.
because it'll come back, but it'll take over too if it's in the right spot.
Chris in Duluth is asking, with a warmer winter, this is a very good question, can we plant outside sooner?
Well, the ground will be warmer, so some things you can, but the temptation's going to be there, and people are going to plant, and we're still going to get. I believe in the 1st of June, we're still getting some frost with the full moon.
Still got that. You know, you can take a look at soil temperatures. I think a lot of seed, they all germinate different. Stay away from all your warm season crops, your sweet corn, your green beans, squash, stay away from all of that. But you can look at what I call the salad crops. They germinate at much cooler soil temperatures, like about 40 degrees or 35 degrees. This would be lettuce, which will take some frost. Spinach will germinate. It won't take frost. Early spinach is delicious, but you're going to have to, it'll germinate, but you're going to have to cover it or be ready to cover it with some kind of material. Radishes will germinate. So think about the salad crops for starting early if you really want to get a start, but there's going to be plenty of time yet. We're very early.
And it kind
in the
of
season.
scratches that itch that you want to get into the soil. You know, you can do a little bit of it.
And it takes under cooler soil conditions. It's going to take much longer to germinate, where you're probably going to catch up if you wait just a little bit longer. You're going to get the crop about the same time anyway, because it germinates so much faster when the soils are warmer.
So when is the safest time to actually start? I mean, is there anything that, like, for sure you're
Well,
safe?
my father and it has always been the full moon, the first full moon in June. We get a full moon, and then we get a rain, and then it clears off, and we get frost. And this has worked every time, as far I think of only one time that this has not been true. And a lot of times that full moon is at the same time as about June 10th. It's right around that time, and that's when farmers believe that you can plant out is June 10th. And only once have I ever had or known of a frost on June 11th. So.
And I was a witness to that frost because I abide by that June 10th. Let's hold, these are for the frost-sensitive tomatoes and so forth that you don't want to put out. And I did. It was about 2-3 years ago, planted on the evening of June 10th. Thought we had an all clear, froze them all down on June 11th. So there's a very small probability that you're going to get a frost, but that can certainly happen for sure.
Sure. That's a family secret. Thank you for sharing that. Dolores in Saginaw wants to know why her potatoes are scabby when she pulls them. She grows the Kennebec variety directly in the ground.
You know, we talked a little bit of wood ash. Scab is caused by a fungus in the soil that's very, very sensitive to higher pHs. So you want to stay away from all of anything that might be alkaline in nature, wood ash or lime. You're going to be very careful. And she can also look for varieties. Superior is one of the varieties that is resistant to scab.
Okay. John is asking, what variety of raspberry plants do you recommend in the Duluth area?
Well, we've got the old Latham, a University of Minnesota introduction, and then we've got Boyne, which is going to be very good in Killarney, two Canadian introductions. So Latham, Killarney, Boyne, and I would say Killarney and Boyne would be the two that you really want to take a look at.
Well, so many good questions, and thank you for sending them in. That's all for Great Gardening tonight. You can follow us on our social media channels, on Instagram at Great Gardening PBS North, and on YouTube at youtube.com/greatgardening, where you can find tonight's episode posted tomorrow. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Deb, for all your insights tonight. We'll return for a new episode next week where we'll talk about the best amendments to use for your garden. So from all of us here at Great Gardening, thanks for watching and enjoy the garden.